So my name is Israel and my colleague she is. So we came from Chonbuk National University, and so today I think we, like the other presenters, they were talking about different subject matters, and I don't know if we could relate it with the other presenters, but we'll be talking about refugees here in Korea and the refugee policy that was implemented since 2013. So my presentation will be about policy analysis. So we gave it a title like Less Restrictive Immigration Policy and the Future of Refugee Protection in South Korea. And it is a policy review. And we came from Social Welfare Department, so our direction of argument could be somehow related with welfare. So this is how we prepared the presentation. I will say something about the background of refugees here in Korea and the aim of our study and the method that we used and the main content of the presentation, and we will have some kind of conclusion at the end, maybe kind of suggestion. So as a background for the whole study, there is a study which is conducted on the migration trends internationally. So this study included 45 countries, and it's checking whether their immigration policy is restrictive or not. So within these 45 countries, South Korea is positioned as a less restrictive country for refugees and asylum seekers. And the country, South Korea, signed the UN Convention for Refugees since 1992. And since then, we will see a trend of refugees and asylum seekers coming to the country. So since 1993, the refugee applicants really dramatically increased. So as you can see from the graph, we have Nammin Sinchonja, the applicants for being a refugee, and the ones who really recognized as a refugee, and the one who got rejected. So as you can see on the trend, there is a huge amount of refugee applicants, and at the same time, there are people who are being rejected. So the red line that you see at the bottom of the graph is how much the country accepted refugees. So as you can see, it's almost none. So as you can see from the number, up to 2019, we have almost 20,000 refugees or asylum seekers in the country. So this is the acceptance rate since 2004. As you can see, there are more applications coming every year, but the acceptance rate is really low. And the policy that the country has since 2013 is being called the first in Asia, but it is also known for high rejection rate, minimal social welfare provision, and some kind of discrimination. So we decided to study the policy, and we want to see if there is something that we could learn about it. And the study was a critical analysis of the policy itself, and we want to update it up to 2019. And the second aim was to understand if there is a potency in the country for refugees and asylum seekers. Like it's a question if South Korea could become a haven for refugees or asylum claimants. And the third aim was we want to learn if this policy would be a successful policy in the future. and will it really protect refugees? So the method that we used is the famous policy analysis method. It was developed by Gilbert and Taylor in 2012. We, in social welfare, we really use this method to analyze if a policy is really designed to serve its people. So there are 4 dimensions in the policy analysis. That's the base of social allocations, the type of social provisions, the strategies for the delivery, and the financing system. So using these 4 dimensions, we analyzed the policy, and in addition, we saw if there is a positive dynamics within Korean society with regards to refugees or asylum claimants. So let's go to the first dimension, which is allocation and provision. So in every country that we go to, the cost of refugees and asylum seekers is always a headache. We don't know who is going to cover the cost for refugees and asylum seekers. So it's always a murky area, and nobody knows who will cover that cost for these people. And not every host country is fully willing or able to provide for refugees. According to United Nations Convention, it's always recommended that countries have an international consensus or a political willingness to really help refugees and their cost. And in host countries like South Korea now, there should be a proper refugee-friendly system, and there should be a socio-political willingness to really accept them and to really accede to the UN Convention of its global effort to help refugees and asylum seekers. So at the end of the analysis, we kind of questioned if South Korea is really doing its part. Is it because there is an international pressure and we didn't know? It's just a question. So in the Article 31 of the policy, it is stipulated that the refugee shall be covered by the social security at the same level as that of the citizens of the Republic of Korea. So it means if once a refugee is accepted as a refugee within the country, he or she should be considered as the same position as the citizens of the Republic of Korea. But the reality is really far from that. And if this policy, the effectiveness of this policy needs to be critically questioned. And some organizations who are doing their work on human rights protection, they say the Refugee Act is merely a symbolic one and it's politically restrictive. According to the policy, there is a renewable 3-year visa for recognized refugees, and still the question of permanent residence is not being answered. And with regard to asylum seekers, they might get a little bit of living support, but for the first 6 months they are not allowed to work. So they will be leading a little bit of a difficult life. And the asylum seekers are not under the coverage of foreigners of emergency support target groups. And the refugee reception center at the Incheon Island at the Yongjong Island, it's criticized for being isolated from the mainstream society. So it's not giving them the chance to integrate into the society and be able to understand the ropes of living here in Korea. Okay, the second dimension that we saw is the service delivery. And within the service delivery, the biggest difficulty was the question of the immigration officers having the cultural competence that is needed to deal with the issues of refugees and asylum seekers. So the service providers generally, they need to be culturally sensitive, and they need to have people who could interpret different languages, and they should be cross-culturally support giving workers, and these officials, they need to be always trained according to the global changing circumstances. But the reality here in Korea is there is always a growing need for language interpreters, for example, for the language of Arabic and things like that. And even the refugee status determination process is really understaffed. Within the country, there are only 38 advisory officers nationwide. But these 38 refugee advisory officers, they are doing the case for 19,931 cases. So they are hugely overburdened. And one problem with regards to languages, the ill translation of refugee screening interviews. For example, there are not people who could really interpret the real case of the refugee, so their case might be rejected because of this kind of ill translation. So the finance, let me just say one thing about the finance. Normally, the country's administration cost for refugees and asylum seekers should be more than 70%. But the 70% of the budget is being, or the 65% of the budget was being used for administration costs. Okay. So, because of this kind of issues, we can say that the asylum seekers within the country, they are far from being the burden on the country, because they are supporting themselves and they will be working in neglected job slots within the country, so they will be covering their own costs. So there is nothing that they are getting from the country. So let's say something about the concerns within Korean society. So, and one question is really Korea a country for refugees and asylum seekers? And that's really a question. And there are some incidents within the country. Last year, there is a refugee crisis in Jeju Island. There were around 516 refugees, asylum seekers from Yemen, and there were like petitions within the country for the government not to accept these people. And there is really an anti-refugee sentiment within the society, and there were even some asylum seekers who went on a hunger strike in front of the Blue House in Seoul. And as you can see on the right hand side of the picture there are some hate and threat messages sent to refugees and asylum seekers. It's coming from Korean citizens, telling them that to go back to their own country and things like that. So it was really hard thing for them to. So this is part of our conclusion. What could be the way forward for the country to be a really good host for refugees in the future? So the first thing that we recommend is there should be a political relaxation, and there should be an understanding from the government that these people are also people and they should be able to be served as a human beings. And there should be some kind of genuine approach towards the global refugee crisis. There are people who are losing their homes and losing their livelihood because of war in so many different Okay, so this could answer the question of allocation and provision. And the last 2 points, it's on delivery and finance. On delivery, there should be a culturally sensitive institution for these people. And there should be an understanding that what kind of situation led these people to flee to a different country. So there should be some kind of cultural sensitivity, and they should officers should apply the benefit of the doubt for the refugee, because if there is some kind of complication within the immigration officers, they should give the benefit of the doubt to the refugee and the asylum seeker. And as a country, there should always be a humanitarian stance to accept these people as human beings rather than pushing them as an outsider. So the country should, like at the societal level, there should be a humanitarian stance and compassionate sentiment. So, and the role of civil societies should be mentioned as one of the actors in the future of this policy. And the civil society should continue lobbying the government to have a clear policy stance, meaning that the policy at this point is not really clear and it's written on the paper, but practically speaking, these people are really leading a precarious life. So civil societies should also continue their public relations role among the refugee community, the government, and the wider Korean society. They are the only one who could link up the government, the Korean society, and the refugees themselves. And they should keep on working on issues of discrimination, human rights, issues of racism, and other types of social exclusions. And they should continue stretching their hands for international alliance, because the refugee crisis is not only a problem within Korea, but it is a global crisis. There are wars going on in the Middle East right now, in some places in Africa, even in Latin America there are some social unrest going on. So there should be a global understanding of what led these people to flee their homeland. So civil societies here in Korea, they should continue stretching their hands to link up themselves with international movements. Okay, that's the presentation that I have. I don't know if I made myself clear. So thank you. So if you have any questions, that's my mail and the corresponding author, and you can ask me questions and things like that. Thank you.